I knew something was off the moment I spotted the muddy footprints on my back porch. They weren't mine. They were fresh, irregular, pressed deep into the planks like someone had taken their time, unbothered by being seen. That alone told me everything I needed to know. I live on the edge of Maple Hollow, a quiet neighborhood in northern Missouri. The kind of place where people mow their lawns at exactly the same time on Saturdays, wave politely from driveways, and act like privacy is a sacred covenant. At least it was until the Homeowners Association decided they weren't neighbors anymore but monarchs. And presiding over this pint-sized fiefdom was Nadine Casterly. Blonde bob haircut, pastel cardigans, designer clipboard, and a voice that sounded like two cats fighting in a garbage disposal. If ever there were a face for HOA tyranny, it was hers. I'm Elijah Brody. I build things for a living: decks, sheds, sometimes full homes. I'm a single dad raising a stubborn 12-year-old who has more opinions than I ever did at that age. And I don't tolerate trespassers, especially not the kind who believe their title gives them the right to stomp over other people's boundaries, literally and figuratively. For 3 straight months, Nadine had been launching a passive-aggressive crusade against me. First, she cited my pickup truck for being excessively visible from the road. Then she slapped me with a violation for planting vegetables in my own backyard. Last week, she tried to fine me for staining my porch too dark because it didn't match the curated aesthetic of the community. She actually said that. Curated aesthetic. Like I lived in a museum. That's when I started locking the gate to my backyard. I'd caught her once with a pair of binoculars peering over my fence like a bad spy in a sitcom. But this was different. The prints led down the steps, across the gravel path behind the tool shed, and straight to the old root cellar door built into the hill that backs my property. It's old, 1940s era. Concrete reinforced with a steel door. I use it to store tools, produce, some emergency supplies. Nothing glamorous, but it's mine. And the door was ajar. I stepped down carefully, quiet as I could, heart steady. The air changed as I entered, cool, damp, silent. Then I heard it, a faint rustling, breathing, whispering. I flipped the switch. The single bulb buzzed to life, casting a cone of yellow across the cellar. And there she was, Nadine freaking Casterly, crouched in front of my potato bins, holding her phone up like she was some kind of undercover investigator in a floral blouse. "What the hell are you doing?" I barked. She nearly dropped the phone, spun around, face flushed, but she didn't look scared. She looked smug. "Mr. Brody," she said, brushing dust from her cardigan like this was all very normal. "This structure is unregistered. You're in violation of residential zoning protocols. I'm within my rights to inspect any potential breach of HOA code. You broke into my property," I growled. "I am the HOA president," she snapped, waving her phone like it was a federal badge. "Section 14, subsection B." "No," I cut her off. "This cellar predates the HO by 70 years. You just committed criminal trespass." She folded her arms. "I'll be reporting this to the board." "Good," I said, stepping out. "You can tell them when the sheriff gets here." Then I locked the door with her still inside. "You can't do this," she shrieked from behind the door. Preserving the scene of a break-in, I called back. "Sit tight." I walked straight back to the house and called the sheriff. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. This wasn't a neighborhood dispute. This was stalking, harassment, a break-in, and I had her cold. Deputy Colton Harlan arrived within 30 minutes. She was still yelling. I handed him the footage from my security camera, the one she didn't know existed. It showed her entering through my side gate, ignoring the posted signs, making a beeline for the cellar. Harlan watched in silence. His jaw clenched. Then he knocked. "Ma'am, come out," he called. "I demand you arrest this man," she shouted as he opened the door. She marched out, red-faced, eyes wild, spouting threats about lawsuits and public disgrace. "You're the HOA president?" Harlan asked. "I was performing a routine check for code violations. You entered a locked structure on private property. That's trespassing. You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm dead serious," he said, pulling out his notepad. "You're lucky he's not pressing stalking charges." I cut in. "Nadine, you're not in charge here." She looked ready to explode. Instead, she spun on her heels and stormed off. Harlan followed, asked her to stop, and less than 10 minutes later, she was in the back of his cruiser, screaming about legal overreach. It should have ended there. But this was the HOA. 2 days later, I got a letter, official letterhead, signed by the vice president, Terrence Greeley, a man whose face looked like it was permanently pinched from smelling something sour. They were fining me $10,000. $10,000 for creating an unsafe structure and endangering a community leader. I laughed. Then I realized they were serious. That's when I grabbed my binder, the one where I documented every ridiculous letter, every blurry photo of Nadine lurking, every timestamp from every security feed, and I called someone who hated corrupt HOAs more than I did. Her name was Camille Barrett. We went to high school together. She's now a city attorney. She flipped through my binder and nodded once. You have enough to sink a barge. Good, I said, because I'm done playing nice. Within days, the whole neighborhood felt like it was about to combust. People avoided me on sidewalks. Eyes lingered on my porch. Whispers followed my every move. Then an anonymous envelope landed in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of printer paper with one sentence. You might have won this round, but you don't know who you're dealing with. Camille told me to bag it and take it to the sheriff. This isn't about fines anymore, she said. This is about power. I added more cameras. Set up motion sensors on the ridge behind my property. By the next morning, I had an appointment with Sheriff McBride. He listened carefully, then looked me dead in the eye. I've had my eye on this HOA for a while. But this might blow it wide open. Camille began drafting a formal complaint outlining harassment, fund misuse, abuse of authority. You seen their financials? She asked. I had, and they didn't make sense. A landscaping vendor billing them double the standard rate every month. Same name on every invoice. The LLC? Registered in another state. The agent? Terrence Greeley. That's when the pattern clicked. Nadine was the enforcer. Terrence was the banker. And the money? It was vanishing. I needed proof. And I found it at the county records office. Buried in zoning requests and tax filings was a land purchase. For acres outside the neighborhood. Bought under the HOA's name. The tax mail? Addressed to Terrence's personal law firm. They were using HOA dues to buy land they secretly controlled. Camille's voice was calm but electric when I handed her the file. We're taking this to the state attorney and the press. The next night, I hosted a meeting at the community center. No HOA logos. Just facts. Over 50 people showed. They saw the invoices. The fake vendor. The land scam. When I laid out the map showing the illegal property expansion plan, it was like lighting a fuse. By the end of the night, 37 residents had signed on to our complaint. 2 days later, Nadine tried to tow my truck. Claimed I was non-compliant. I stood on my lawn while she directed the tow truck like a traffic cop. Then the sheriff arrived. Same deputy as before. Nadine screamed. Again. Deputy Harlan calmly unhooked the vehicle and escorted her off the premises for violating a cease and desist order. She was screaming about conspiracies the whole time. But this time, my neighbors were watching. No one defended her. 3 days later, the state auditors arrived. What they uncovered sent shockwaves across the county. Money laundering, land theft, insider trading on municipal development plans. They weren't just corrupt, they were criminal architects of a system designed to bleed us dry. And then, we found the rich. Survey flags. Soil testing. Hidden deeds. They were trying to annex land, including mine. Underneath the ridge was a natural spring. If they proved it passed into the common area, they could develop it. Camille was right. Nadine wasn't looking for violations. She was scouting vulnerabilities. The news broke a week later. Headlines across Missouri lit up with stories of HOA fraud. Paul Greeley was arrested. Nadine confessed under a plea deal. The HOA was dissolved by court order. Residents would be reimbursed with interest. We won. Not just me. All of us. The community came back to life after that. Potlucks replaced HOA meetings. Casseroles replaced citations. And slowly, peace returned. One spring morning, I took down most of my cameras. I reinforced the cellar door. Not out of fear. Out of principle. It was where I made my stand. And now, finally, it was mine again.